with the likes of Apple coming out with the Vision Pro, and also, of course, Meta had the Quest 3 and HTC, the Vive Elite XR. Those headsets are bringing us into the mixed reality realm. I think that's actually where we're going to see a big push and into where the industry will go towards. I think the mixed reality, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of pluses for it.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Great to be back again. This week we have Lance Bauerfeind joining us for the first time on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. So welcome along, Lance. Great to have you joining us on the New Zealand Tech Podcast today. You're the head of training and simulations at Company X. Tell us what that's all about and what Company X does.
Yeah, certainly. So Company X is a software development company primarily, and a number of years ago joined up with Company X and working in the VR, AR, spatial computing area. So since then we've been working with a number of different organisations, but also now working with defence and, like I say, a number of other companies as well.
Yeah, great. Well, pleasure to have you on the show. Lots we want to delve into today. We will talk about the role of AI facial recognition, which is starting to, and I think we probably first talked about this maybe a couple of years ago. Facial recognition sort of coming into play within our supermarkets. It's been getting attention again. New Rocket Lab launch that's just taken place with a focus on helping to address issues with space junk. Our phone bans are coming into play in schools very soon. In fact, some have already started. Infotech.co.nz is dead. I've put that in the agenda as it was something that I found a little bit disappointing in the local tech news world. And then there's a bunch of some interesting global aspects. And probably the real reason that I was really keen to chat to you today, Lance, is really delving into what's happening in the world of virtual reality, augmented reality, and this new thing of spatial computing, particularly with the Apple Vision Pro, and your thoughts on the Apple Vision Pro and whether that is, I guess, a win or a fail for Apple. So we'll come back to that one. But first up, big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. And yeah, let's jump in on this facial recognition situation. We've been seeing really ongoing attention, across the big media to the supermarkets, looking or moving forward on facial recognition technology. So yeah, Foodstuffs have this trial running in a number of stores, and you could call it a trial, but realistically, they've gone live with this technology, in a number of supermarkets, and what we have seen in New Zealand is really ongoing issues at a retail level when it comes to crime. It has really, seems to have dramatically increased over recent years. And, of course, we see some very, extreme, scenarios there with the likes of jewelers and so on getting attacked, but mostly sort of smash and grab type things. But in my neighbourhood, we saw one of these dairy attacks where, sadly the worker at the dairy was killed. So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on this type of technology, which has that potential to maybe reduce the impact of crime, and all of us are impacted in one way or another when crime increases. But we've also probably, all seen over the years sort of Hollywood, productions where there's a level of technology and artificial intelligence that kind of, comes in to help minimize crime. And there's all sorts of, things that end up taking places and bad uses of the technology. And look, I was quite pleased to see that foodstuffs, at this point are sort of, ring fencing, what they capture in terms of the facial recognition data. So if they've got, maybe somebody that offends at a particular supermarket, they're not spreading that out across their entire network, although it could be argued that actually that would have a bigger impact. But at this time they're keeping that information to a specific store. They do seem to be quite committed that they're not keeping data. So if you walk into a supermarket and you pay for your goods and you walk out again, that your image isn't going to be sitting around on their systems for I think it might be a number of single digit days, maybe two or 3 days, so that data doesn't last very long. So I think there's some good thinking that's gone in here. Do you feel comfortable about this technology in the supermarkets, Lance?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? That a lot of the technology like this comes in for very good reasons, and in this case, I think, it's good reasons. I think you just have to have the protections around there, and quite how you do that. I mean, like you're saying, if they're only keeping images for so long, then great. Probably, I would think if they were holding on to my images, maybe it's not even their intention, but do they get hacked, and then does a whole bunch of other stuff emanate out of that? I know, first reading this headline, I was reminded of a number of years ago seeing a television article actually about a restaurant chain in the US, that as you walked into the door, that they used facial recognition, looked you up on Facebook, and then sent you deals based on, like, it might be for half price Coke with your family meal or whatever that might be. And I thought, I could see, I mean, could it go that way with this sort of thing as well? Perhaps, but to me it sounds like that they are cognizant of privacy and security. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to be having the discussions. We can get pushed into doing things because of other societal sort of challenges push us to do things that otherwise we might not be so happy to do. And I was looking at the stats that Foodstuffs were sharing and saying that this trial follows 4,719 incidents of retail crime across the Foodstuffs North Island stores in the last quarter of 2023, including 513 breaches of trespass. So that would be an exact situation this technology could assist with. And that it was up 52% on the previous quarter. So when things go wrong, we will often, try and apply new things to solve those issues. Sometimes that can be a knee jerk. And, I think, there's a whole lot of scenarios we can look at, sort of looking around the world where, things have been put in place because of certain scenarios, whether it's, wars or whether it's, pandemics and so on. Those things, trigger laws that we might not be otherwise comfortable with, or trigger the use of technologies that we might, not be, so keen on. On the flip side, there's a lot of good, uses of technology during these times as well. And I guess it's that challenge of getting it right. So look, I think it's going to be interesting to follow how this progresses. I think my experiences with Foodstuffs North Island, we've had Chris Quinn on the show who heads up the company. That they're pretty forward-looking from a technology and innovation perspective, and I think they'll be thinking about the same sort of things we are, but there might well be some disagreement on whether they're getting this one right or not. So it might be time for another chat with Chris to get his viewpoint on this one. Did you have anything else on that one?
I was just going to add there as well, is that with implementing any sorts of technologies, you never really know all the consequences and ramifications of what you do. So it is a learning thing, right? So like you're saying, that maybe with the best intentions that you are implementing this technology, but you don't fully know how that will end out. So it's something you have to treat carefully, I think.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great point. Now, talking about Rocket Lab, look, it's encouraging to to see them continuing to launch. They had a bit of a break there, after they had a failed situation, last year. I forget what the term is, but an explosion in the air that was unplanned. But they're certainly back into it, and this current launch they've done was focused on a Japanese satellite that its purpose is to be collecting data on space junk, and specifically to in terms of looking at this orbital debris, they're specifically looking at one of the Japanese rockets. It's a H-2A upper stage that was left in low Earth orbit after the launch of an observation satellite back in 2009. So this satellite that's gone up, ADRIS-J, will fly around it and inspect it with various cameras and sensors. And it's going to take something like 3 to 6 months, apparently, to complete this mission. And this is interesting because we keep hearing more about space debris and really the major risks associated with it. And if we get big items that were to break up in space, we could get ourselves into a pretty difficult situation where it becomes very, very hard to navigate space and to put things up if there's too much small debris that's floating around the place. And we look at the International Space Station, the ISS. They at times have had to maneuver it to avoid it being hit. And these bits of space debris go around very, very extreme speeds that could be quite catastrophic. So good to see more work going on in this front, isn't it?
Yeah. I think also another space, but in defence, space is becoming another frontier, and a lot of countries now also looking at a space force as well. So it'd be interesting that it will only get busier up there, I think. So having a good mechanism or good controls on how that area is managed, then I think it's just a necessity.
Yeah, look, and the recognition of how things are moving in that area, that we now have a space minister in the Honourable Judith Collins, and so these things are obviously coming more and more onto the radar for government and for business. Now, we're not far off from this phone ban coming into place in schools. Some schools have already got these things in place, and that's certainly something that parents have already got used to. My son, he's allowed to take his phone to school, but basically he can use it before or after school. So if he's chasing up and wondering whether he's getting picked up after school, things like that, he can use it, but not during the school day. And we see the Ministry of Education have put out a bunch of information around that. Basically, schools have to get their rules in place no later than I think the beginning of term 2. And so really they are in many cases getting started now if they didn't already have a policy. I was pleased to see that there is some flexibility around this policy. So if a phone is really needed for specific health reasons like monitoring insulin levels, then that's okay. If a phone is needed for a student, to help them from a disability or learning perspective, then that gets the tick. And even students can require students to use their phones for a specific, say a class assignment or some other task, and the principal also has an ability to override the rules for special circumstances. So it's not a completely a complete ban, but it's not far off it. I guess one of the things that stands out for me is, as we've had a lot of issues with social media platforms, youngsters sort of getting bullied through some of these applications, and even just sort of text messages and things floating around the school. and those things will continue to be an issue because they can happen, obviously outside of school hours and so on. I do think there's a lot more awareness of it now, but maybe it turns the dial down a little bit on some of those issues. The fact that the use of these devices is blocked in schools. How do you feel about it, Lance?
Well, thankfully, I think I'm a little bit older. All my kids are grown up, so. But I must say that our children still went to school, and we did what we had. What actually was a family phone, mobile phone. So that necessarily went to the eldest, so that if they did need to contact us or anything like that, like normally reminding us to get picked up was a classic, because there was the odd time when they were forgotten. So probably a testament to our parenting abilities. But yeah, I think they're good. They're good for a purpose. They're like anything, they can be abused. It's like a knife. You could butter bread, or you can cut your finger, or whatever. So I think having a device is a good thing. It's just about managing it right, and like you're saying, for the cyberbullying, that type of thing, of course, that needs to be stopped, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's pretty hard to manage. I think there's a fair level of responsibility on the social media platforms themselves, and there has certainly been a targeting of younger people by some of these platforms, and often content that's delivered to them through the algorithms that's it's not healthy, shall we say. So, that's something that really moves into the parenting realm of how do you manage and deal with these things. And look, not everyone is going to know how to do that. So the reality that the social media platforms, to a reasonably large degree, I would say, don't care, is something that we need to be aware of and to think about it. But being able to manage those things as parents isn't necessarily the easiest thing to attend to.
No, that's right. And I think, Paul, sorry, just quickly, I was just a couple of years ago, I was at the chiropractor actually, and they were checking me over and checked my neck, and they were saying, "Oh, your neck is nice and straight," I go, "No, isn't everybody's?" And in fact, what they're saying now is that more and more now, it's kind of like the younger kids and younger generation that are on their phones all the time are getting a curvature in the neck from looking down at their devices. So maybe being able to cull that is a good thing in itself, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't heard that. So that's probably a tip that parents will find useful when negotiating with youngsters, is another reason why they should put phones down. And for those of us that maybe sometimes are a bit older and are using our phones too often too. So Now, infotech.co.nz, this is a URL I've typed into my browser many times over, multiple decades. This went to what I guess sort of started out as I think it was a weekly news from what is now Stuff, was Fairfax back in the day. It was an insert into some newspapers, but it was the tech section in recent years for stuff.co.nz. And I've typed it in recently and found it just went to stuff.co.nz homepage, and I was a little bit mortified. So there goes the end of another tech publication. Even just a view on tech from Stuff is gone. And that's because they no longer have a tech page, and they're not really covering tech anymore. I guess you could go into all sorts of discussion of, tech's in everything, so maybe you don't need to break it out and so on. But I think it's a little bit of a loss, but probably a reflection that they really weren't doing much on that front in recent years. But I would I'd still go to that old favourite URL and find some interesting stories from time to time. So, there's probably quite a list if we look back over the years of the tech media that has disappeared in New Zealand, from the likes of Bits and Bytes and, Computer World. And, this is I guess, just a final nail in the coffin for that infotech type coverage. From Stuff into sort of some of the global topics. Air Canada got themselves into a spot of bother recently. So what they had done was decided, hey, we can outsource a bit more of our customer service by using an AI chatbot, and they put this up on their website. And in this particular case that's gone through the courts, the chatbot, obviously drawing on some of their information, but presumably a bit of hallucination, indicated to a customer who had gone to their website, what their options were in terms of a bereavement situation and Air Canada's travel policy. The chatbot got it wrong, and so this person sort of went ahead thinking that they could buy travel and get a refund or partial refund later. However, the advice from the chatbot was actually, I guess, rubbish. So there's I guess a bit of a warning here, isn't there, in terms of how organisations leverage technology, and look, often there is a benefit from jumping in and trying things out, seeing how they work, but you also need to balance that up with the risks and wrap the appropriate sort of guidance around its use. And it looks like Air Canada jumped in here maybe too quick without figuring it out, without doing appropriate testing in-house, and I think they've actually disabled their chatbot at this time. They've taken a bit of bad press, and it hasn't cost them a large amount of money in the scheme of it, but it doesn't look good when you can't trust a communication with your airline.
Yeah, well, when I heard that story, I immediately came to mind. There's a difference between being cutting edge and the bleeding edge.
Yes,
and I think Air Canada jumped straight to bleeding edge, and you don't. In my view, you don't need to necessarily. You should look at technology in a way to augment human performance. It doesn't need to replace. And I think as we see here, that if you jump in too fast, too early, it can have painful results.
Yes, certainly that was the case this time around. Now we're going to delve shortly into sort of VR and AR and Apple Vision Pro spatial computing. But one of the things I came across a couple of weeks ago was some coverage around what was referred to as OnlyFake, and a site basically where AI neural networks is able to churn out fake IDs. And so this is sort of I guess a little bit of an insight into the darker use of AI, right? So there's lots of great, good, positive uses of AI. Then there's the kind of in between ones, like what we've just heard, where the chatbot was probably helpful to a whole bunch of customers, but when it gets it wrong, that's not helpful to anyone. And then you get these other uses where people are using AI for criminal intent. And so, being able to go to a website where it will just generate you an ID, a passport, driver's license type ID that you can then use to go online and support doing maybe illicit transactions, or maybe you're trying to be anonymous where the law would say that you can't be, as an interesting use case. And I think we're going to see a lot more of these situations. One thing we probably haven't seen a lot of yet, but it seems really obvious, is the sort of phishing emails and spear phishing type emails where AI gets used en masse to send fake emails that actually draw on a whole lot of data that's around the internet or in some data source, and makes an email from an automated source appear very real. Is this something that worries you about AI, Lance?
Yeah, I think, right, I would say most people, I hope, I've been phished, and people trying to grab my ID and so on and so forth. And you really, the only thing around AI or any technology that gets misused, I kind of think the common denominator is unfortunately the human. And I can only see solutions coming through how we manage the human aspect of it all. Because I think that, right, with AI, the technology is out there and available, and there's so many different options and opportunities for people, good or bad, that I don't have an answer fully. But
Yeah.
I think it is to do around people rather than necessarily trying to tame the technology in this case. I could be wrong.
Yeah, look, it's I think we're going to have a few years ahead of interesting challenges in terms of how we work through these things, where legislation helps, and often it can hinder as well, and how you give responsibility. But because we see a bunch of the AI technology is available in an open source manner, it means you can't necessarily control what happens to it. Like, for instance, with most social media platforms, where they're headquartered, and that there's some jurisdictions that that they sit in, and some regulation around things. But that's going to be very hard when the technology is available in an open source manner, and that really allows people to do with the technology what they like. Now, as we sort of move into sort of talking a little bit about the AR and VR, but before we do that, there's been a bit of coverage around Brilliant Labs and their frame glasses that is quite interesting. If you look at the coverage online, they seem to have some quite nice looking what they're calling AI glasses frame. And what they seem to have, they're referring to it as integrated multimodal AI assistant. And there's if you read some of the stuff that's been published online, I was reading what VentureBeat released, and it looked like a whole lot of spin to be fair. And they were sort of talking up how stylish they looked, and name dropping all sorts of folks from Steve Jobs to Gandhi because of the sort of roundness of the glasses, and varying other sort of aspects in terms of the technologies they're using. But I guess the concept is maybe quite relevant today. This idea that you could wear some glasses that are using the likes of ChatGPT on an ongoing basis to maybe answer questions, to look at say you're looking at a sign and you're in a country where the signs are in a language that you don't understand, where it can translate those signs. And I've certainly been in that position myself in parts of the world, because it's got a little camera mounted right in the center of the glasses. But from most regards, it does they just look like a reasonably normal set of glasses. And I guess there'll be a few questions I would have around when and how the functionality turns on and off, and how it gets out of the way when you don't need it, which I would argue you probably don't want this technology listening and looking all the time. Is this something that's caught your attention?
Yeah, I think like over the years, we've done a lot of work with AR, and AR glasses, and I follow an optical engineer who talks far above my head about technically how difficult AR actually is, especially when you're wanting to project an image that's millimeters away from your pupil.
Yes.
But actually, you're trying to give it a sense of depth. So, for example, if you were in a workshop and you wanted information to appear linked to an object that might be 5 meters away or something like that, how do you make that have that sense of depth and project that depth of that information to that particular item in the workshop? It's incredibly difficult, and that's why I think we see, with Apple and, for example, with Meta, that this idea of these fully 3D augmented AR headsets or glasses some way off with the technology because they keep pushing back their delivery dates, right? I think.
Yeah. So you kind of have that option for a vendor to launch something that doesn't do everything, but is maybe sort of similar to the Google Glass and so on of old, tethers through your phone, and that's where it can do things like interact with some sort of an AI system, or you get something that's quite big. And that there's a lot of years of iteration ahead before it maybe gets mainstream.
That's right. And you've got to start somewhere, right? So the idea, and that's essentially, say with Google Glasses, it was video and text, and it might be the weather or an email notification or so on, just because that's all doable, it's more of a simple problem to solve. But so I think with these particular glasses, I think you're right. I think it didn't look to me like there was too much more than what's already been around and has been around for some years.
Yeah. And I mean, I've certainly seen them at the likes of, CES with, Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas over the years with varying people, Sony and others sort of bringing out different glasses that do different things. But it's really tended to be a very small number of vendors whose product has sort of, caught the attention, of most media, and they have the potential to gain traction. And I guess this is what, that's brings us to the Apple Vision Pro now, where we're, a few weeks in since the Apple Vision, Pro, the first kind of early, reviews and commentary online, and then, pretty close to 3 weeks since people have been able to get their hands on them. We started seeing the folks posting on online that they're returning their Apple Vision Pro on one side, but other people who are they're really pleased to have the technology. I'm really kind of curious what's your take on this, because Apple are a company that seem to be able to always attract a massive amount of attention for their technology. However, there hasn't been a massive amount of coverage of the Apple Vision Pro in traditional media. Sure, it's been there, but maybe not the sort of attention that we would be used to for something that is as completely fresh or new from Apple. And we seem to have quite a range of viewpoints of people across particularly the US, because it's not not broadly available anywhere else unless you jump through a lot of hoops, or you're willing to bring something back from the US. So of course it's consumers that Apple are the strongest at reaching, but of course the technology's at a price point where it maybe isn't so much a consumer play at this point in time.
Yeah, I think a small disclaimer here, Company X doesn't have one just yet, but we are lining ourselves up to get one. But having, like you, watched a number of different reviews and, just keeping abreast of things, and also been fortunate enough to know a developer that was on the beta testing team. So talking to my developer friend, he thinks they're pretty awesome, And when you look at it, I think from our perspective, we look at it from a commercial, industrial type of use case rather than a consumer-based one. So our view on it would be different to a lot of the reviews or the consumer-focused reviews, because for us, I mean, a lot of the say the consumer-focused reviews that I've seen, they would talk about things like avatars, or that this isn't quite good, or I don't like the way this looks, or my eyes that are projected into the headset are lower than they really should be, and things like that. But for us, for a consumer, that's important. For us, it's not, because if you think about it, a company that would use this type of technology, in a way, the employees kind of, not necessarily forced, but they kind of have to use it for their work. So you have kind of like a focused or committed audience or committed user base, because it would bring about it would bring about, efficiencies for the company and cost savings and so on and so forth. So for us, for the Apple Vision Pro, we think the technology is looking really good. The things that interested me most was the display quality, from what I read. And that's really important. But for example, if you're creating a VR, because it's VR and mixed reality, of course, having a good quality or the ability to be able to see in the distance with accuracy, is really dependent upon the quality of your display. So from what we've read is that the quality is excellent. So for us, that's a big plus. And so we can use that for our clients who require that kind of that degree of resolution, if you like.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be one of the standout areas. I don't know if you saw the video which Mark Zuckerberg shared online, talking about he had tried the Apple Vision Pro, and basically saying that their Meta Quest is a better product, on almost metrics, I think was his comments looking at the Quest 3. I thought was very interesting, that he would I guess put himself out there and try and differentiate between what are two sort of very different products in terms of certainly the price points and sort of some of the quality and so on that Apple bring to the table. But from some perspectives, actually it's important to have that distinction at this point in time, because they're in many regards they're drawing on access to the same sorts of technologies that are available, and how things play out depends on how different companies like Meta and Apple invest and leverage the varying technologies that are available today. And I guess this technology isn't super mature yet. So whatever you look at on these things, you will see a whole bunch of shortcomings, but also a lot of potential for what will come in the future.
And of course, commercially too, I think it's not necessarily just about the device as well. I mean, if you look at Meta, so we're working with government organisations and so on and so forth, there is that perceived thing about Meta around data. And so there are stipulations around not using any or not having data stored on Meta servers and so on and so forth, even though that they have now released a business plan. It's still kind of this thing hanging over Meta, though, as Mark Zuckerberg might think his headset is the best. That isn't, especially in the commercial space, that isn't always the major issue, and that organisations will accept lower quality in certain things to ensure that their data is their data.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think, Zuckerberg and Meta, have proven themselves to be untrustworthy in numerous regards. And, an organisation would be unwise to be putting too much trust in Meta. And I mean, just so many situations that I've come across or have been shared with me, whether it's accounts that have been hacked, whether, customers that may be spending thousands of dollars a month with them in advertising, an account gets compromised, and just how shocking they've been at helping people out. Myself, I have an Instagram account with a very, a small following, sub 1,000 followers, and it's on a regular basis over the last sort of 12, 18 months. I've seen someone effectively duplicate that account, then use fake accounts to build a following that looks very similar, and then try and pull people in to follow and start direct messaging them with scams, and even going through media channels. I haven't had satisfaction with getting them to address that and to put a stop to it in a timely manner. It seems like the sort of thing that wouldn't be that hard to do when someone basically duplicates your bio, duplicates your photo, and then locks an account in a particular manner. It seems like a pretty clear and common pattern, but there we go. So I think it's a huge point. And look, Apple have proven themselves to be trustworthy from a business perspective, and from a data privacy perspective. Streets are ahead of Meta, and that's a badge that they I guess that they wear, that they can be trusted from that perspective.
Yeah, and also, Paul, to get back to your original comments around with Apple with the Vision Pro, that I think that their philosophy, and this isn't just entirely my opinion, I've spoken to some others that tend to agree, but their philosophy is around using industry, for example, to help them develop the product and work it down towards consumers. And I think that's solely around, there are things like you're saying, it's far from a finished product, and being able to test that and use that and develop it with companies, with organizations that will have the committed users, seem to me like actually quite a good way of looking at it and doing it, because the cost initially is going to be so high. They know that, they're not going to be able to sell millions straight away as they would an iPhone. So how do you actually get your product out there, start to get people used to it, seeing it, and be able to develop it? Because, like you say, for $3,500 US, it's not really priced as a consumer product from my perspective. And of course, technologically, people, there's you're saying a lot of people returning that because they're talking about VR sickness and other things, or they're expecting just way too much from the technology itself. I was reading things, where they're talking about if you move your head really fast, then you're going to have motion blur issues with the cameras and that sort of thing. And you think with us, if we understand that constraint, then we can develop training and experience and simulations to work around that, so that doesn't necessarily become an issue. But if you have from a consumer perspective, I want to just move it's supposed to, will work for me, and it will just help me with everything, and there's going to be no real major issue, so that, it gives me a better experience. But especially at this point, it doesn't always work that way.
And, one aspect I'm always looking at technology from is how can this, help New Zealand organisations, and personally with my own business, Gorilla, we're looking at those sort of small to medium organisations. So I'm looking at this as with every technology through a lens of, how could we apply this? How could it help? And, it probably seems to me at this stage it's probably not mature enough for most organisations, but there will be some. I remember a conversation I had with someone that was a kitchen designer and manufacturer some years ago. It was maybe best part of a decade ago now, and they were sort of quite a small outfit, and we're talking around that they didn't have the budgets or necessarily even the space to build up all these kitchens, but they had built some incredible high-end kitchens and, and varying, private properties, whether rich listers or what have you. Part of my commentary to them was, well, can you get permission as you build these things to get a 3D capture and to at least show people in a VR headset, so that there will be use cases, but probably not necessarily there for every organisation just yet. And in terms of how it plays out longer term, what are your thoughts? Is this type of technology something that is very much here to stay, or as quite a mainstream thing over time, or will it always be sort of something at the fringes? Or do we expect in 10 years' time, when you jump on a plane, everyone's going to throw on their headset and be, interacting with friends around the world while they're on their plane, or just watching a movie, and we don't need anything else while we're on the plane, and so on? Do you have a kind of your personal thoughts on where all this lands?
Yeah, I think, like, personally, I know, like, there are things like AR contact lenses. I think Mojo is one that comes to mind. So And I think there's more traction there. I think for the consumer, for the consumer base, it needs to be less of a headset device that sits on my head, rather than something that can integrate with the way that I work, and whether that's an earpiece or contact lenses, whatever that, something quite miniature that doesn't become I guess a major thing that you need to put on, and it would cut you off from the environment and so on. But I think also the thing that we're seeing with the industry now is with the likes of Apple coming out with the Vision Pro, and also of course Meta had the Quest 3, and HTC the Vive Elite XR. Those headsets are bringing us into the mixed reality realm. Whereas before that wasn't, originally, a number of years ago, and it's still around to a certain degree, was the HoloLens.
Yes.
But now it seems to have moved on a lot more. And I think we're talking about VR, where you're cut off from your environment, with mixed reality. For example, if you were doing a training on a car engine, you could still be in your office or in your room, still see your room, but have the model of the car engine appear in front of you. You can break it apart, and you can go through the necessary training. I think that's actually where we're going to see a big push, and to where the industry will go towards. I think the mixed reality is, I find it really good to use. I think there's a lot of benefits and a lot of pluses for it. So that's kind of looking at the industry. I think that's where we'll go. I think for training and simulation, and I think for consumers, I think before there's a bigger uptake, I do think that it needs to be a more manageable device that's more integrated in with the person, rather than something that gets stuck onto them.
Yeah, I remember the time that I bet Elon Musk to Mars, and I walked around on Mars in
Nice.
augmented reality with the Microsoft HoloLens, and Buzz Aldrin was there, sort of commentating and so on. So yeah, there can be something sort of exciting around the technology, and for me that was quite a memorable experience, and I guess partly because it was quite new technology at the time. But yeah, there is that opportunity to create experiences that you're not going to have in quite the same way within any other tech and screens. So yeah, really interested to see how it plays out. It's been great to have you on the show, Lance. Thanks very much for joining us. Anything else you wanted to sort of add before I ask you the big question around whether the Apple Vision Pro is a hit or a miss, or what else would you like to share there?
So I'll answer that. I have nothing further to add. Is it a hit or a miss? I actually think it's a hit. But obviously, I know there's a lot of people going, it's a miss, it's miles away and that sort of thing. But actually from Company X's perspective, we see it's another device that offers another set of functionality and advantages that can help us to, provide great solutions for clients. So I think it's a hit.
And look, I think it's going to take a little bit of time for us to, see how it gets leveraged. But just because of that cut through that Apple has, we've had iterations of other technologies before, that I think we're going to see a bunch of new stuff that will land on the Apple Vision Pro that we haven't seen. Software vendors that have probably had the capability to do something with the other technologies, but because of the cut through that Apple brings, we will see a level of investment that maybe we haven't seen in the past. So yeah, I think we will see some pretty interesting things over the coming period. And of course, when it comes to Apple, we know they like to kind of iterate and release new versions. Sometimes they've been a bit slow with some of their Macs, where they've left it too long. Other devices, it kind of feels at times like they're too regular. But I imagine they're going to find some sort of a sweet spot in the middle. And something that hasn't been much talk of is this is called the Apple Vision Pro. So my gut feel is there's going to be an Apple Vision without the Pro at some point as well. Lower price point type thing. And we'll have we'll just have to watch and see how these things play out. But yeah, Now, big thank you, of course, to everyone for listening in to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Of course, a big thank you to those that help us keep the New Zealand Tech Podcast operating week to week. So thank you to Gorilla Technology, HP Spark 2 Degrees and 1 NZ. And huge thank you, Lance, for joining us on the show, and to Company X for giving you a bit of time to share with us.
My pleasure, and thanks very much for having me, Paul.
My pleasure too. And look, thanks everyone for listening in. If you've been watching the live stream, of course, make sure you do look out, whether it's through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow the show on those platforms. And if you're listening to the audio, then you can also find us in video form, and most weeks with a live stream on YouTube, X, Facebook, or by connecting or following myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn, where we also stream. So thanks everyone, and we'll look forward to catching up again next week. And thanks again, Lance. Cheers, everyone.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.